So right when you're starting out, high runes can be incredibly hard to come by. So you gotta make some good decisions early on. What rune words are you gonna go after first? And one of the most common questions I get asked, you gonna make that Enigma first? Or are you gonna make the Infinity first? Now, in general, I get asked this a lot because I play so much offline single player. You go out, run lower Kuras, you get the Sur runes, and maybe if you get lucky and get the Burr runes. Then you go ahead and cube those up the jaw, or keep them at Burrs and go ahead and use 2 Burrs to make the Infinity. This can also apply to online, though, because you still got to kind of decide, are you going to make one of the rune words that maybe is better on way more builds and way more characters than the other ones because you plan on playing more than one build on a season? Or, like I said at the original in the intro, perhaps you are starting off that single player, maybe a Holy Grail, or just an offline single player account. And you want to know which one's going to give you the best bang for your buck early on. So first, we're going to take a pros and cons type of approach to this, and we're going to take a look at the Enigma first. So first of all, the biggest pro to making Enigma. Could you guess what it is? Well, you're probably right. The most probably OP skill in the entire game you can get on any single character. Usually it's stuck on the sorceress, but that is, of course, teleport. This skill on this particular rune word can open up so much efficiency when out there trying to farm better gear or trying to level up even faster. It is just incredible. And I don't really have to tell you that, and most people already know. And like I alluded to there, it kind of seamlessly moves into the next pro. It works on essentially every single character and really most builds in the entire game. There are, of course, exceptions, certain builds that do not use the Enigma, maybe Energy Shield Nova Sorceress, for example. Perhaps there's a Javazon you want to throw on Hustle, or, a Smiter where you're throwing on Fortitude, or it depends on how you want to build characters. But really, every single character in the game has builds that can utilize this, and really probably 80, perhaps even 90% of all builds in this game get way better while using it. So next up, we'll talk about some other things besides just the most obvious teleport that do come on this particular rune word. The next one, which is, well, one of my favorite things on the Enigma, because I'm a magic finder at heart. I'm Holy Grail and trying to find every unique in the game, and that is the amount of magic find. Now, you get 1 magic find per level, so when you get up there into the 90s, you got dang near 100 just on your armor. So that's a good start right there. It's almost the most you can get on an armor here in Diablo 2 Resurrected. But we'll move into a couple other things that come on the rune word. Of course, you get 2 to all skills, which on an armor is the most you can get. A few other things that are astronomically helpful. You get 0.75 strength per character level. So if you're up in the 90s, you're getting 60 or even up into the 70s to strength. That makes it super easy to equip some other rune words. You can save those strength points and actually pump them into vitality. Also, because it does have a Burr rune in it, you do get 8 damage reduction. So there's actually a bunch of survivability that comes along with this rune word as well. Now, there's some other things along with it as well. We're going to jump to the cons now. Now, what are the negatives to going ahead and making your Enigma first over your Infinity? Now, there really is just mainly one huge con to this, and that is it takes a jaw rune. So it is much more expensive to make Enigma than Infinity. Now, generally, if you're out there running lower Kuras, you're hoping to get, like I said, the Surs and Burrs. The Burr is the highest one you can get from those super chests at LK. So we'll speak of it in the terms of Surs because they are much more likely to find than the Burr. But for Enigma, it takes actually 6. Let me get the right number of fingers up. 6 Sur runes in order to make it. And of course, it takes only 4 Surs to go ahead and make that Infinity. So realistically, it's about the only con to going with Enigma first, along with, I guess you could say, you don't get that conviction aura that does actually come on Infinity that we'll talk about in a little bit. So next up, let's talk about the pros to making Infinity first. Now we'll jump into the ones that we kind of mentioned when talking about the pros and cons with Enigma. The first off, of course, Infinity is much less expensive than Enigma. Just taking those 2 Burr runes instead of a jaw and a Burr, which is harder to come by. Next up, Infinity is used on a ton of builds in Diablo 2 Resurrected, essentially every single caster. Not literally, but almost every single caster in the game. Now, that does exclude the melee characters, but melee characters aren't really used as much in my experience anyways, especially on single player if you're trying to get out there in Holy Grail. Because in Diablo 2 Resurrected, there really is no melee AoE. If you're out there farming strictly by yourself and you want to be efficient to find more high runes, to find rune word bases, to find the rare uniques, kind of the casters you go with a ton of a time, unless you're just playing something for fun. So probably, I don't know, we'll guess and say 80% of the time, you're probably throwing Infinity over on that caster's mercenary. Of course, the main reason you do throw that Infinity over on your mercenary is, of course, the conviction aura. And that is a huge boost to your damage. Now, looking up on the trusty internet here, it looks like that Conviction Aura at level 12 that comes on Infinity actually does minus 85 to your enemy's resistance. So it depends on how much resistance the monster actually has to kind of understand how much percentage-wise it boosts up your damage. But I mean, I'm no math expert, but that's probably maybe even close to doubling the amount of damage that your character outputs. Like I said, depends on the build and how much resistance the monster actually has that you're actually minusing away. So the damage boost that you get from having that Conviction Aura on Infinity is really difficult to understate. It is awesome. Another one that's easy to overlook is actually having that Infinity actually boost up the survivability of your mercenary. So first of all is pretty much the most obvious on Infinity. You get 0.5 vitality per character level, so you get almost 50 vitality. That's obviously going to help out the survivability for your mercenary, of course, but it does also have a bunch of damage, up to 325% enhanced damage, in fact. So the more damage you do, you actually leech back, if you have leech on your other pieces of gear, a percentage of the damage you do. So if your mercenary deals more damage, he actually is leeching back life, dealing out even more damage, like helping out your mercenary if he kills stuff faster. Then obviously the monster that he killed isn't killing him. You actually have a 40% chance of crushing blow, which also does a kind of a bunch of damage against monsters that have huge life pools, we'll say act bosses and things like that. Now for the cons of making Infinity, there's not really a whole lot either. For both these rune words, not a lot of cons to making them because they're awesome. But the biggest one is essentially that it's not Infinity. Having that teleport, it's hard, once again, it's hard to understate how powerful this skill is for increasing your efficiency on every single build, with the exception of the sorceress, I suppose. But even with that being said, Enigma is pretty much best in slot as the armor for many different sorceress builds. And yes, I know it sounds strange, but even though sorceress doesn't need that teleport. Now for my final conclusion, this is my opinion, so take it for what you will. I would say, I know it's a challenge, I know it's more expensive, I know it's going to take you more time, but what I would choose is go ahead and make Enigma first. And to be honest, I've actually done it both ways before. Back in the LOD days, I went ahead and made Infinity first because I figured I'd just be out there farming with the sorceress the longest. But that's kind of the thing. If you go ahead and make the Infinity, you go ahead and do help out the sorceress a bunch, but you can't really go around and play this build and play that build and play this character and play that character. You're kind of, not literally, but kind of stuck on playing the sorceress because having teleport just makes your farming so much more efficient. So I'm not going to say I regretted it back in the LOD days, but now I went ahead this time on Diablo 2 Resurrected when I restarted my offline single player account to start a new Holy Grail. I made Enigma first, and I feel like I was much happier with that, because even without Infinity, you got Enigma, you can get out there with any type of item find barb, teleporting around the pits, you get out there with your Poison Necro, your Summon Necro, teleporting all around the Cast Sanctuary, no problem. You can even get out there with a Druid, Assassin, any of the characters, all of a sudden you can teleport at least into the Cast Sanctuary without having to run around the maze in order to get there.